So after combining the Big Five, the Myers-Briggs, and the Enneagram, we have arrived at the sum of all human personality, which the Enneagram calls the face of God. And because you've arrived at everything we know about people, we've pulled in, for two reasons, we've pulled in the attributes of God according to Christianity, because of two reasons. The Enneagram calls itself the face of God, and because we're trying to make sense of the sum of human personality and traits and abilities. So to give an example of what we've done, I'll take the two-wing one, the ESFJ. So instead of just, and we're going to talk about how the Big Five, the Myers-Briggs, and the Enneagram would view the same thing. So if you're an ESFJ, that means according to the Big Five, you're high on extroversion, low on openness, high on agreeableness, high on conscientiousness, right? And those would be traits about you. And then with the 16 personalities, or the MBTI, also called the Myers-Briggs, you would be the console. Well, with the format that we've arrived at, that we're calling the face of God, for lack of a better term, you wouldn't, as an ESFJ, you wouldn't just be someone who's extroverted, agreeable, and conscientious. You wouldn't just be the console, psychologically or mentally or personality-wise. You wouldn't just be even driven by the need to be needed as your fundamental need. You would actually be the embodiment, and this is how we're thinking of it from now on, and because this is the line of thinking we've followed to get to this point, that you aren't just those things. You are, as a 2-in-1 ESFJ, you are the embodiment of the divine attribute we call mercy. And it's exciting to me because I think we have taken our view of human personality to its most profound or encouraging level. Once again, where we've arrived at, as a 1-wing 9, for instance, you're not just high on openness and high on conscientiousness and driven by perfection and an architect. You're the embodiment of order itself. And like we talked about, 2-wing 1, you're the embodiment of mercy, and 3-wing 2, you're the embodiment of good, and 4-wing 5, you're the embodiment of freedom, and 9-wing 1, you're the embodiment of love. So that is why I love what we've done with correlating all the personality types. Now you may ask, well, we've done it, I like it, it's encouraging, it's by definition maybe the most encouraging way that you could see yourself and other people as embodiments of divine attributes. But can we take it further than that? And that's where you may be surprised that yes, you can. And I think that it's almost necessary that you can, because it can be kind of too abstract, just thinking of, saying, well, you're the embodiment of mercy or order. What does that really look like, and what does that mean? And what if you want to incorporate more good into your personality, or justice or freedom, for instance? Well, that's what this video is about, is taking the next step, or really taking other things about the personality typing systems and weaving them into the format that we've created that we call the face of God. The first thing I want to weave into the format for personality that we have discovered together is the cognitive functions of the MBTI. Now, what the heck is that? So this can get kind of complicated, or at least it took me a long time to understand it. But the cognitive functions of the MBTI, I'm gonna try to explain it this way, that there's 4 basic parts of a human being. The first being their soul, or you could say their identity. I'll add that up here. That if you don't believe that people have souls, that's fine. But it's really their ability to have an identity. It's like having a name, an identity. It's soul is considered the immaterial part of yourself. It's the part that transcends your body. Is one way that I think is appropriate to talk about it. So the first is soul. If you don't believe in that, you can just think of it as your identity, and that's the part of you that the Myers-Briggs is talking about when it refers to intuition. This is my understanding of it. The next one is your heart, your ability to feel emotions, called feelings. And that when the Myers-Briggs is talking about feeling, it's talking about this second part of you, which we'll call your heart. The other one is your head, and that's your ability to think. So when the Myers-Briggs talks about thinking, it's referring to the third part of you, which we will call your head. You might say mind. The fourth part of you is your body. So when the Myers-Briggs is talking about sensing, then it's talking about your body, right? So these are the 4 parts of a person, and this is the level deeper from the interplay of traits in the Myers-Briggs. You take the test to get your traits, but then I'm going to gloss over this like I did how I got the correlation kind of between the Enneagram and the Myers-Briggs, but your sense of judging dictates the cognitive functions of your specific type, okay? And there's 8 cognitive functions, and those 8 cognitive functions are made up of the 4 parts of you split into extroversion and introversion. So what do I mean? Well, I'm going to spell it out here. And this may look more familiar. And this is the best way I have of explaining what the cognitive functions of the Myers-Briggs or the MBTI, also called the 16 personalities, is. So the first one being your soul, which they call intuition. And then this you might be aware of, that there is extroverted intuition, called NE. There's introverted intuition. Introverted intuition, called NI. Here, I'm going to underline this. This is where they get the N from, right? This is where they get the F from. This is where they get the T from. Okay. So there's NI, there's NE. NI is introverted intuition. So the first part of you being your soul, which they call intuition, it's akin to your identity. If you don't believe in people having souls, you can think of intuition as your sense of self that you have innately. So soul, and it can be you can have an extroverted soul or an introverted soul. So there's NI and then there's NE. Introverted intuition, extroverted intuition. Okay, and then it's going to be down the line for the 4 parts of a person, right? So we have introverted intuition, extroverted intuition, so that's your soul. And then it's going to be the same for heart, head, and body. You can have an introverted heart or an extroverted heart. And it's we'll get to this point, but so let's go ahead and do this already. So FE, extroverted feeling. And I kind of misspoke a little bit because, well, let's finish this and we'll get to it. Okay, so there we have it. So the 4 parts of a person split up into extroverted, introversion gives us the 8 cognitive functions of the MBTI. NE, NI, FI, FE, TE, TI, SI, SE. Once again, the cognitive functions are the deeper level of the Myers-Briggs, also called the MBTI, also called the 16 personalities, all one thing, which we are going to call the MBTI. The cognitive functions is a deeper part of the MBTI, and they are put into what they call stacks. And the cognitive function stacks are the order of which you use each of the 8 cognitive functions. I think it'd be easier to illustrate what I mean. So let's start with the one we usually start with, the INTJ. Well, by now you know, just by you understand what it means to be an INTJ, because we've talked about it pretty thoroughly. You're introverted, you're intuitive, you're thinking, and you're judging, conceptualized as conscientious, if we're thinking about the MBTI traits from the Big 5 perspective. Okay, now what you might look at that and say, that's kind of surface level, and it's just how your brain works. That's not really who I am. Things like that. These questions or these things might pop up in your head. Well, they've kind of accounted for that with these cognitive function stacks. So every personality type, so there's 16 according to the MBTI. So this one, INTJ, the INTJ has all 8 cognitive functions at work, but primarily 4 functions. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm just gonna spoil this the way that I jumped from the MBTI to the Enneagram. I'm just gonna do that here as well. So this is an INTJ, and you might recall, I'm just gonna do this just for clarity purposes. INTJ is a 1-wing 9, and it's also order, if we're thinking about it according to the thing that we've been working to get to, which we call the face of God. So INTJ 1-wing 9, order, and we're lacing in what are called the cognitive functions and then the stacks that they're put in according to the MBTI. And the number one cognitive function, so at the top of the stack for an INTJ, is introverted intuition. And we've talked about what that is, so I'm not going to do it again. And I'm just going to churn these out. So, because I think a decent amount of people have not heard of these. The second function in the stack for an INTJ is extroverted thinking. The third is introverted feeling. And the fourth is extroverted sensing. I'm going to do this for all of them real as quickly as I can. So ISTJ, 1-wing 2, justice, its number one cognitive function is introverted sensing, extroverted thinking, introverted feeling is the third of 8. But you'll notice we only have 4, and we're going to incorporate the other 4 eventually. But the first 4 are considered what they call the light side. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it's called the light side. And what that really means is so every MBTI has the 8 cognitive functions at work in their life, right? But there's 4 functions that make up what they call the light side, which is really the 4 of 8 functions that you're most using or most aware of at any given time, with the number 1 function being your top function, the cognitive ability that you're most tuned into. Okay? So we've moved on to the 1 wing 2, ISTJ, justice. Its number 1 function is introverted sensing, number 2, extroverted thinking, number 3, introverted feeling, and then number 4 is extroverted intuition. We'll keep churning these out. 2 wing 1, ESFJ. Which we've conceptualized as mercy. ESFJ. 2 wing 1, mercy. Their top function is extroverted feeling, introverted sensing, third function called the tertiary function. For the 2 wing 1 is NE. The fourth function called the inferior function, also called the grip, is, what would it be? TI. Okay, moving on. We have the 2 wing 3. Gosh, I did it again. Here. ENFJ. 2 wing 3, grace. So how does grace work cognitively? Well, it's got the same dominant or first function as 2 wing 1, which is extroverted feeling. But then for its second function, also called its auxiliary function, it's got introverted intuition instead of introverted sensing. And then for the third function, it has extroverted sensing. And then for its grip or fourth function or inferior function, it's got the same as its relative other Enneagram 2, introverted thinking. Okay, moving on. Next we have the 3 wing 2, the ESTJ. 3 wing 2, which we call goodness. So how does goodness work with the cognitive functions? Well, the first cognitive function being used when goodness is at work is extroverted thinking, the thoughts of other people. Standards is one way to conceptualize this, in my opinion. The second function is introverted sensing. The third function is extroverted intuition, or NE. The fourth function, also called the inferior function, also called the grip, is introverted feeling. Moving on to the ESTP, which is the Enneagram 3 wing 4, and the divine attribute of glory. How does glory work cognitively? Well, the first function is extroverted sensing. So the five senses: touch, taste, sight, and whatever the other two are. And then the second one is introverted thinking. So my thoughts, or internal thoughts, as opposed to the thoughts of others. So instead of standards, it's critical thinking, individualism, etc. The third function is extroverted feeling, the feelings of others, as opposed to my feelings, or introverted feeling. And then the fourth function is introverted intuition. Okay. Then we move on to the Enneagram 4. And that starts with the INFP, which is the 4-wing 3, which is beauty incarnated. So how does beauty work? Well, introverted feeling is the number one function. My feelings, significance. This is the significance function. That's one way I've conceptualized it. And then extroverted intuition, which is the endless possibility function. So I feel in every direction is how the INFP works with the first two functions. The next one is for the 4-wing 3 INFP, beauty, is introverted sensing. And then the next one is extroverted thinking. On to the 4-wing 5, the I'm butchering this, the ISFP, 4-wing 5, freedom. The cognitive function stack of the ISFP 4-wing 5, freedom incarnated, is starting out with the same as a 4-wing 3, which is introverted feeling, but then instead of NE, it's SE. So they're more grounded in their own body as opposed to being intuitive. And then they have NI as their third function, also called the tertiary function. And they've got the same grip as their neighbor 4-wing 3, which is extroverted thinking. So the thoughts of other people. Okay. Next, we have the Enneagram 5, which starts with the ISTP, 5-wing 4, which we've called wisdom. So how does wisdom work cognitively? Introverted thinking is how it works. The dominant function of an ISTP is introverted thinking, so thinking for yourself. And then they are very similar to their neighbor 4-wing 5 because they have SE as their second function. And then for their fourth function, similar to the 4-wing 5, they have introverted intuition. And then for their grip, they have extroverted feeling, the feelings of other people. Okay. INTP, which is the 5-wing 6. We have knowledge. And like wisdom, it's introverted thinking on top, but then it departs at the second function with extroverted intuition. So if beauty is I feel in all directions, knowledge is I think in all directions. Moving on to the Enneagram 6, we're going to start with 6-wing 5, which, if you recall, that's the ISTJ. which we've called patience. And their top function is introverted sensing. Their second function is extroverted thinking. Their third function is introverted feeling. And their grip, or fourth function, or inferior function, is extroverted intuition. Okay. Now for the neighboring ISFJ, or 6-wing 7, we have faithfulness. Which, like patience, starts with introverted sensing, but then it's extroverted feeling in the auxiliary spot, or second spot, instead of extroverted thinking. And then it's introverted thinking instead of introverted feeling, and then, but they have the same grip. The 6-wing 5 and the 6-wing 7 have the same grip, which is extroverted intuition. Okay, the last 4. We're moving on to the 7-wing 6, which is the ESFP, and blessedness, according to our format of things. And their number 1 function is extroverted sensing. I did that wrong. Don't ask me why they put the consonant before the vowel here. It always has tripped me up. Okay, extroverted sensing. Second function is introverted feeling. Third function is extroverted thinking, thoughts of others. And their last function is introverted intuition. Okay, 7-wing 8. ENFP, which we've called spirit. You can also call it charisma, and other similar things. Their number 1 or dominant function is extroverted intuition. Then they have introverted feeling in the same spot as their neighboring 7-wing 6. They've got extroverted thinking in the same spot as neighboring 7-wing 6. But then they have SI as their grip instead of NI. Moving on to the... there's actually more. This is not the last one. Okay. So moving on to the 8-wing 7, ENTP. We've called that wrath. And their top function is NE, second function is TI, or introverted thinking. Their third function is FE, fourth function is SI. Moving on to the 8-wing 9, ENTJ, holiness. Top function is TE. Second function is NI. Third function is SE. Fourth function is FI. And there's 16 and there's 18 in the Face of God format, or the Enneagram format that we're following. So the last 2 are the 9-wing 8 and the 9-wing 1. 9-wing 8, let's see if we can cram them in here. 9-wing 8, 9-wing 1. 9-wing 8 is the INFP, same as a 4-wing 3. And they are jealousy as opposed to beauty. And then The 911 is an INFJ, and they are love. And their cognitive functions are FI for the number one function of the 9-wing 8, NE as the auxiliary, and SI as the tertiary, and TE as the grip. And then for the last one, 9-wing 1, INFJ, love, the top function is introverted intuition. Second function is extroverted feeling. Third function is introverted thinking. And the fourth function is extroverted sensing. So now we don't just know what divine attribute we embody, and what others embody by using the Myers-Briggs and the Big Five and the Enneagram. We actually know the cognitive functions or ways of thinking of each of those embodiments. That was the point of this exercise, was to lace in the deeper parts of the MBTI, specifically the cognitive function stacks, so that we can understand the attributes that we and other people embody, and then how that works itself out cognitively.